At 06:18 hours on December 13, 1939, Captain Hans Langsdorff watched 3 British cruisers split into 2 groups, each steaming directly toward his pocket battleship at 32 knots. His 11-inch guns could kill at 35 kilometers. The nearest enemy mounted 6-inch guns with half that range. Graf Spee had sunk 9 British merchants totaling 50,089 tons in 3 months. Now, 250 miles off Uruguay, 3 cruisers with half his firepower were closing from opposite bearings. Langsdorff had 18 minutes before they reached effective range. In 82 minutes, his ship would be combat ineffective, forced into neutral harbor, scuttled by her own crew. How do you destroy a raider without sinking her? The bridge of HMS Exeter smells of paint, oil, and cordite residue from gunnery drills. Captain Frederick Bell stands at the compass repeater, watching the range close. 18,700 yards, the fire control computer is calculating deflection for a target moving at 26 knots on a converging course. 3 twin 8-inch turrets, A, B, Y, track left as Graf Spee grows larger in the optics. The mathematics are brutal. Graf Spee's 11-inch shells weigh 300 kilograms and can penetrate Exeter's 76 mm armor belt at any range. Exeter's 8-inch shells can penetrate Graf Spee's 80 mm belt, but only inside 18,000 yards. Closing speed, 58 knots combined. Rate of closure, 2,000 yards per minute. In 9 minutes, Exeter will be inside kill range. So will Graf Spee. Bell doesn't know that Commodore Henry Harwood, commanding from HMS Ajax, has been planning this exact scenario for 6 weeks. Harwood studied the raiders' pattern. 9 merchantmen sunk since September. Last victim, SS Doric Star, radioed her position before dying on December 2nd. Harwood calculated the geometry. Graf Spee would hunt where shipping was densest. The River Plate estuary carried 1/7 of Britain's meat imports. Harwood positioned his 3-ship force 150 miles offshore and waited. When smoke appeared at 06:14, bearing 394 degrees, Harwood's doctrine was already drilled into every captain's brain. My policy with 3 cruisers versus 1 pocket battleship, attack at once, split into 2 divisions, force him to divide fire. You're about to watch how dividing an enemy's attention turns numerical inferiority into tactical dominance. At 06:18, Graf Spee fires first. 3 300-kilogram armor-piercing shells scream over Exeter at 2,800 feet per second. The sound arrives 5 seconds after the muzzle flash, a tearing crack that makes deck crews flinch. Langsdorff has targeted Exeter. His gunnery officers know the threat pyramid. The heavy cruisers' 8-inch guns are the only British weapons that can cripple Graf Spee with a magazine hit. The light cruisers are annoyances. Exeter is the knife aimed at his waterline. At 06:20, Exeter returns fire. A and B turrets roar. The 8,390-ton cruiser shudders. 8-inch shells climb toward Graf Spee. Flight time, 35 seconds. Third salvo hits Graf Spee's superstructure. Splinters riddle her rangefinders, but Graf Spee's third salvo bursts short of Exeter. Shrapnel sweeping the starboard torpedo mounts. 7 men die before they see the shell land. Communication severed. Searchlights shattered. Meanwhile, what Langsdorff sees terrifies him. Ajax and Achilles have turned northwest, closing at flank speed. Their 6-inch guns can't penetrate his belt armor, but they can shred superstructure, destroy fire control, wreck secondary batteries. 2 targets, opposite bearings, angle between them, 95 degrees. His turrets can't traverse fast enough to engage both. At 06:23, Graf Spee's gunnery officer splits fire. 1 turret on Exeter, 1 turret on Ajax and Achilles. Langsdorff curses. He's fighting 2 battles simultaneously. That's exactly what Harwood planned. At 06:24, 6 minutes into the battle, Graf Spee's fourth salvo hits Exeter's B turret. The 300-kilogram shell punches through 25mm armor, detonates inside the gun house. 11 men die instantly. Shrapnel sprays the bridge 40 meters aft. Chart table disintegrates. Voice pipes shredded. Captain's cabin catches fire. Every officer on the bridge is killed or wounded except Captain Bell and 2 ratings. Blood runs into Bell's eyes. The ship swings to starboard. No one at the helm. Bell stumbles aft through smoke. Before he reaches the emergency steering position, Torpedo Officer Lieutenant Commander C.J. Smith wrestles the ship back on course using a surviving voice pipe. Exeter has fired 8 salvos. She's taken 4 hits, but she's still closing. You're watching history no one teaches. This channel exists because you subscribe. If this is the kind of history you want, clinical, precise, no propaganda, hit subscribe now. At 06:30, Langsdorff shifts main battery fire back to Ajax and Achilles. 3 salvos straddle Ajax. Commodore Harwood orders both light cruisers to turn away 2 points, just enough to spoil the German fire solution. At 06:34, they turn back. The dance repeats every 3 minutes. Close to 15,000 yards, get straddled, turn away, resume approach. Ajax and Achilles fire 18 6-inch shells every 20 seconds. Most miss. Some hit, splinters, not penetrations, but they force Graf Spee's 150mm secondary guns to keep firing, burning ammunition she can't replace at sea. At 06:37, Harwood launches his Supermarine Seafox floatplane. Lieutenant E.D.G. Lewin circles at 3,000 feet, radioing corrections. Harwood can now see beyond Graf Spee's smokescreen. The German ship is trapped between 2 fires she can't suppress. At 06:40, an 11-inch shell bursts on Achilles' waterline. Underwater shockwave kills 4 men in the director control tower, stuns the gunnery officer, wounds Captain Parry. Fire control switches to individual turret control. Rate of fire drops 40%. Achilles keeps firing. Exeter, burning amidships listing 7 degrees to starboard, has a turret destroyed, B turret wrecked, Y turret still firing under local control. The gun crew aims manually. All fire control links are severed. The ship has no working compass. Captain Bell is steering by the sun. Exeter turns west toward the enemy to keep Y turret in the fight. Y is a crippled cruiser steaming toward a battleship because Exeter's job isn't to survive, it's to fix Graf Spee's attention while Ajax and Achilles close for the kill. That's not heroism, that's operational calculus. At 07:10, range has opened to 16,000 yards. Graf Spee zigzags northwest for 40 minutes, trying to escape. Harwood orders Ajax and Achilles west at full power. They're gambling. If Graf Spee turns to fight, she can destroy both light cruisers in 10 minutes. But Langsdorff doesn't turn. At 07:16, Graf Spee suddenly swings south, apparently heading back to finish Exeter. Harwood doesn't hesitate. Ajax and Achilles close to 12,000 yards, firing so fast the gun barrels glow. Graf Spee is hit amidships. Fire erupts near the funnel. Langsdorff aborts the turn. At 07:25, an 11-inch shell strikes Ajax's X and Y turrets aft. Both turrets knocked out. Ajax now has 4 operational guns. Harwood fires 4 torpedoes at 9,000 yards. Graf Spee evades all 4, but the torpedo run forces Langsdorff north, away from Exeter, away from open ocean. He's being herded toward the South American coast. At 07:28, Ajax and Achilles turn to 280 degrees. Range 8,000 yards. They're inside Graf Spee's secondary battery envelope. Every 100mm gun has them ranged. They keep closing. At 07:38, a salvo brings down Ajax's topmast. Wireless aerials collapse. At 07:40, Harwood checks ammunition, 20% remaining. Exeter is hull down, barely making 18 knots, all guns silent. Ajax has 4 guns. Achilles is low on ammunition. Graf Spee can still destroy both light cruisers if they press the attack. Harwood makes the call, break off until dark, then close for night. Torpedo attack. At 07:42, Ajax and Achilles turn away under smoke. At 07:45, 82 minutes after first shots, the battle ends, but the real battle is just beginning. Graf Spee steams toward Montevideo, trailing oil freshwater distillation plant wrecked, 36 men dead, 60 wounded. Harwood shadows at 15 miles, just beyond gun range. At 8:07, Harwood broadcasts Graf Spee's position to the Admiralty, to all merchants, to HMS Cumberland, 1,000 miles south. What Langsdorff doesn't know, there are no British reinforcements within 72 hours. Cumberland won't arrive until December 14th. Battlecruiser Renown and carrier Ark Royal are 2,500 miles away, 4 days at maximum speed. Force G is broken. Exeter limping to the Falklands. Ajax down to 4 guns. Achilles nearly out of ammunition. If Langsdorff repairs overnight and sorties at dawn, he can sink Ajax and Achilles, break into the Atlantic, continue raiding. But Langsdorff doesn't know that. At 0:10 on December 14th, Graf Spee anchors in Montevideo. Langsdorff requests 2 weeks for repairs. Uruguay, neutral under international law, allows 72 hours maximum. The British Embassy immediately begins psychological warfare. They plant false intelligence, Renown and Ark Royal approaching. Cumberland already arrived, 6 destroyers waiting offshore. They feed these reports to journalists, diplomats, anyone German intelligence might hear. Langsdorff believes it. On December 15th, he radios Berlin. Surrounded by superior force, unable to break out, recommend scuttling. Berlin authorizes. Langsdorff transfers crew to an Argentine freighter. At 19:54 on December 17th, scuttling charges detonate. Graf Spee settles into the River Plate estuary, burning. On December 19th, Langsdorff wraps himself in the Imperial German naval ensign, not the Nazi flag, and shoots himself in a Buenos Aires hotel room. His suicide note, "I can now only prove by my death that the fighting services of the Third Reich are ready to die for the honor of the flag." If you believe these men deserve to be remembered, not as propaganda, but as they were, subscribe. These stories don't tell themselves. The mathematics are brutal. British casualties, 72 dead, 28 wounded. German casualties, 36 dead, 57 wounded. Ships sunk, 1 German pocket battleship. Ships damaged, 1 British heavy cruiser, 6 months repairs. 1 light cruiser, 2 turrets destroyed. 1 light cruiser, minor damage. Strategic result, first major German surface raider eliminated. Cost-benefit, Graf Spee cost 82 million Reichsmarks. 3 British cruisers cost $5.8 million combined. The British lost 72 men but removed 16,020 tons of capital ship from the Atlantic. Graf Spee had sunk 50,089 tons of merchants. If she'd continued for 3 more months, she'd have sunk 50,000, 100,000 additional tons, 10 to 20 merchant ships, 500 merchant seamen. But the real victory wasn't tonnage, it was doctrine. The Deutschland-class pocket battleships were designed to defeat cruisers, too fast for battleships to catch, too strong for cruisers to fight. Treaty of Versailles limited Germany to 10,000-ton ships. German engineers built Graf Spee to 16,020 tons, brazenly violating the treaty, using electric welding instead of rivets, diesel engines for 10,000-mile range, 6 11-inch guns outranging every British cruiser by 7 kilometers. The doctrine: raid sea lanes, sink merchants, avoid battles. If intercepted by cruisers, destroy them. If intercepted by battleships, outrun them. Harwood's counter-doctrine: force the raider to divide fire, approach from multiple bearings, accept casualties on the heavy cruiser, that's Exeter's job. While the raider is distracted destroying Exeter, close with light cruisers, riddle superstructure, wreck fire control. Force the choice: fight outnumbered or flee damaged. If she fights, she burns ammunition-fighting ships she can't afford to sink. If she flees, she's wounded, trackable. Strategic initiative belongs to the pursuer. That's what Langsdorff couldn't solve. Graf Spee was militarily superior. She could have sunk all 3 cruisers if they'd approached single file. But they didn't. Exeter absorbed killing blows while Ajax and Achilles delivered 1,000 cuts. Langsdorff inflicted 72% damage on Exeter, but Exeter's sacrifice bought 40 minutes for light cruisers to wreck Graf Spee's freshwater systems, fuel purification, rangefinders, fire control personnel. By 0745, Graf Spee was operationally degraded. She could fight, but not indefinitely. Fuel contaminated, crew exhausted. She'd expended 414 rounds of 11-inch ammunition, 41% of her total outfit. Returning to Germany required crossing 6,000 miles of British-patrolled ocean. Continuing raiding required functioning distillation plants. She had neither. Montevideo was the only option. And once she entered Montevideo, the British controlled the narrative. They didn't need to sink Graf Spee. They only needed to make Langsdorff believe he was surrounded. They succeeded. False intelligence, planted rumors. Diplomatic pressure. These cost nothing and destroyed a capital ship. How do you sink a raider without firing another shot? You make her captain believe survival is impossible. The aftermath: Exeter reached Port Stanley December 15th. Repairs until March 1940. Returned to service. Sunk by Japanese cruisers at Java Sea, March 1st, 1942. Ajax repaired by February 1940. Served Mediterranean. Survived war. Scrapped 1949. Achilles served Pacific. Transferred to Indian Navy 1948. Scrapped 1978. Cumberland arrived December 14th, 1 day late. Joined shadowing force. Graf Spee's crew interned in Argentina. Most remained after war. Langsdorff's grave in Buenos Aires still maintained by Argentine Navy. The strategic ripple: Graf Spee's loss forced Germany to recall Deutschland and Admiral Scheer from raiding operations. Both returned to Germany by January 1940. The surface raider campaign, Germany's best hope for strangling British supply lines, crippled before it started. Next, major German surface action, Bismarck sortie, May 1941, 18 months later. Bismarck sank HMS Hood but was hunted down and destroyed. After Bismarck, German surface ships stayed in port. The raider doctrine was dead. River Plate taught the Royal Navy that aggressive cruiser tactics could defeat theoretically superior raiders. This doctrine was applied throughout the war. Shadow at range, attack from multiple bearings, force the enemy to choose between fighting at disadvantage or fleeing into strategic trap. Same principles destroyed Bismarck, but River Plate also revealed the human cost. Exeter lost 61 dead, nearly 10% of crew, in 90 minutes. Men in B turret died when the shell penetrated. Men on bridge died from shrapnel. Men in torpedo mounts died from blast. They weren't killed by superior tactics. They were killed by math, 300-kilogram shells versus 76mm armor. Exeter was sacrificed, not wastefully but deliberately, to fix Graf Spee's attention. That's not heroism, that's operational calculus. The equation worked, they paid for it. Graf Spee's crew, 36 men died from British shells. Most killed by 8-inch hits penetrating lighter armor, secondary batteries, superstructure, working spaces. 6-inch shells from Ajax and Achilles rarely penetrated but killed through splinters and blast. The men who died weren't incompetent, they were standing in the wrong cubic meter when metal traveling 2,000 feet per second arrived. Their ship was better armed, better protected, better designed. They lost because their captain was deceived by false intelligence and because his operational orders, avoid major engagements, left him no doctrinal framework for winning a battle he'd been ordered not to fight. If this stayed with you, press like. In one word, tell us what this was. Subscribe, because when history stops being examined, it turns into myth. River Plate wasn't the largest battle, wasn't the bloodiest, wasn't the most decisive, but it was the first, and it established the template for how weaker forces defeat stronger ones, divide the enemy's attention, accept asymmetric casualties, trade material for strategic position, win the battle after the shooting stops by controlling what the enemy believes. 82 minutes of gunfire, 4 days of psychological warfare, 1 capital ship eliminated. You see, that's the mathematics of war, when firepower alone doesn't determine outcomes. The men who fought, British and German, were pieces in a larger game. They played their roles with competence and courage. The outcome wasn't determined by who fought harder, it was determined by who understood the game better. Commodore Harwood understood. Captain Langsdorff didn't. 72 British sailors and 36 German sailors paid the price for that difference. That's not a story about heroes, it's a story about mathematics, doctrine, and the unforgiving precision of naval warfare, where every decision has a cost measured in lives and tonnage. Remember them accurately. That's the only honor that matters.